When my mother told me to apologize, I almost laughed. Not the nervous kind of laugh. The kind that comes up from somewhere deep when you realize you've been holding your breath for years and you just stop. I looked at her and I said, "Okay." She blinked. She'd expected tears. Maybe begging. That's what she was used to from me. She didn't know I'd already signed the lease. Let me back up. I'm the older one, 26 years old, working a full-time job in accounting, paying rent to live in the house I grew up in because my parents said it would help me save money. That part was true. What they didn't mention was that saving money would mean cooking dinner 4 nights a week, driving my brother to his community college classes 3 mornings a week, and being available on weekends to help my dad with whatever project he'd decided mattered that month. My brother's name is Spencer. He's 22. He has never in his life been told no in a way that stuck. I used to think I was imagining it. That thing where parents have a favorite and everyone sees it but nobody says it. When we were kids, Spencer could break something and it was an accident. I could forget to take out the trash once and it was a character flaw. He got a C in high school chemistry and my dad said he's more of a people person. I got a B+ in AP physics and my mom said you should have gotten an A. I stopped expecting fairness a long time ago. What I didn't stop expecting was basic decency. That expectation was my mistake. It started in February, 4 months before everything fell apart. I'd been saving for 2 years to buy a used car. Nothing fancy, just something reliable, so I didn't have to coordinate my schedule around Spencer's anymore. I had $11,000 set aside in a savings account. My own money, from my own paychecks. My dad found out about it at dinner one night. I don't know how the conversation turned that way. One of those family dinners where someone asks a question and suddenly you're being interrogated. He said it like it was obvious. You should put that toward a family emergency fund. I said that was my car money. He said the family came first. I said I'd think about it. He didn't like that answer. The next week, Spencer got a speeding ticket, his third one. He needed $800 to keep his license. My parents didn't have the cash immediately available. And somehow, at dinner again, my dad looked at me and said they'd need to borrow from my savings, just temporarily. Just $800. I said no. The table went quiet in a way that had a texture to it. My mom said, "He's your brother?" I said, "I know who he is." My dad said I was being selfish, that the money was just sitting there, that family helped family, that I didn't understand what it meant to be part of something bigger than myself. Spencer didn't say anything. He was looking at his phone. I transferred $800 the next morning because I was tired and because I knew what happened when I didn't comply. The borrowing was never mentioned again. Neither was paying it back. 3 months later, Spencer crashed his car. He wasn't hurt. The other driver wasn't hurt. But Spencer's car was totaled and the other driver's bumper needed work, and there was an insurance situation that was somehow also, eventually, a me situation. Spencer's insurance had lapsed. He'd forgotten to pay it or decided not to. I was never clear on which. My dad had co-signed the policy originally, and now there was liability exposure and a lot of phone calls happening behind closed doors. I didn't know the details yet. I just knew that my parents were stressed, and that when my parents were stressed, Spencer became untouchable and I became responsible for everyone's mood. My mom pulled me aside one evening while I was doing dishes. She had that look she gets, not angry, just sort of carefully arranged into something that wanted to look reasonable. She said the situation with Spencer's accident was complicated. She said they might need access to some of my savings to cover the gap while things got sorted out with the insurance. She said it like she was asking. I turned off the faucet. I dried my hands. I said, "How much are we talking?" She said possibly 4,000. Maybe a little more, just until Spencer could get back on his feet. I stood there for a second, then I said, "I'll think about it." She said, "We really need you to be a team player right now." I went to my room and I sat on the edge of my bed and I thought about the word team. I thought about how I'd been on this team for 26 years. I thought about the $800. I thought about the dinners I'd cooked. I thought about the mornings I'd driven Spencer somewhere and then been 20 minutes late to work. I thought about the car I didn't have yet. I opened my laptop and I started looking at apartments. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't impulsive. I didn't make a dramatic decision in a fit of emotion. I made a spreadsheet. I researched neighborhoods. I looked at commute times and lease terms and average utility costs. I figured out exactly what I could afford without touching my savings. I read 3 different lease agreements before I found the one I signed. I did all of this over the course of 6 weeks quietly, while continuing to cook dinner and drive Spencer and smile at family meals and say, I'll think about it whenever my parents brought up the money. I told no one, not my work friends, not my college roommate who I still talk to every week. No one. The apartment was a 1 bedroom, 12 minutes from my office, on the 3rd floor of a building with in-unit laundry and a parking spot included. It was $700 more per month than what I was paying my parents. It was the best decision I have ever made in my life, and I knew it the moment I walked through the door for the showing. I signed a lease on a Tuesday. My move-in date was the 1st of the following month. I had 3 weeks. I started moving things out slowly, books mostly, first, then clothes I didn't wear often. I brought bags out to my car in the morning before anyone was up, drove to the apartment on my lunch break, dropped things off. I did this 4 times over 2 weeks. I was meticulous about it. Nothing that different in my room. I kept the closet arranged the same way. The conversation about the $4,000 came to a head on a Thursday evening. My dad called a family meeting. That's what he called it. A family meeting, like we were a corporation, and this was a scheduled agenda item. We sat in the living room, Spencer on the couch with his arms crossed like he was bored. My mom in the armchair, my dad standing near the fireplace. He explained the situation again. Spencer's accident, the insurance gap, the liability. He used the word we a lot in ways that kept including me in things I hadn't agreed to. Then he said they'd need the $4,000 by the end of the month. I said, I'm not going to be able to do that. My dad's expression shifted. What do you mean? I mean I'm not going to give you $4,000. Spencer looked up from wherever his eyes had been. My mom pressed her lips together. My dad said, we're not asking. We're telling you this is what the family needs right now. I said, I understand. And I'm telling you that I can't help with this. He said, you have the money sitting there. I said, that money is for my car. He said I was being selfish. He said Spencer needed support right now, that he was going through a hard time, that I had a stable job and no major expenses, and I should be grateful for what I had instead of hoarding resources while my family struggled. I listened to all of it. I kept my hands still in my lap. When he finished, I said, I hear what you're saying. He said, so you'll do it. I said, no. The room got very quiet. Then my mum said, you live under this roof. You eat at this table. You have gotten so much from this family, and when we need something from you, you sit there and say no? Spencer said, without looking up. She's always been like this. Something in me just settled, like a weight dropping into place. I said, okay. I stood up. I said, I think we all need some time to think. I went to my room. I lay on my bed and I looked at the ceiling and I thought, 4 more days. I want to tell you about my dad's face when he's angry because it matters later. He doesn't yell, usually. He gets very still and very deliberate. His voice gets quieter, actually. It's worse than yelling in a way because it feels like he's decided something about you, like you've been evaluated and found lacking and now you're going to hear the verdict. The next morning at breakfast, he delivered the verdict. He said that if I wasn't willing to contribute to the family in a meaningful way, then I needed to think seriously about whether I was ready to handle real adult responsibilities. He said he'd been talking to my mom, and they'd agreed that perhaps I needed to step back from some of the things they'd been subsidizing for me. My phone plan, which they still paid for, the car insurance that was still on their policy from before I could afford my own. He said it like it was a consequence, like he was teaching me something. I had already transferred my phone number to my own plan 3 days earlier. I had already gotten my own car insurance. I had already, that same morning, changed the address on my bank account, my work payroll, and my voter registration. I said, that's fair. He paused. I said, I think some space would be good for all of us. He said, we're not kicking you out. We're explaining that there are expectations. I said, I know. He looked at me the way people look at someone when they're trying to figure out what they're missing. I went to work. Moving day was a Saturday. I'd arranged for 2 friends from work, people my parents had never met, to help me. I'd rented a small trailer. I'd been strategic about what I moved gradually and what I needed to take on the actual day. The furniture, the bigger boxes, the things that couldn't be done in a lunch break. My fan had slept late on Saturdays. By the time my dad came downstairs at 9:15, my room was empty. Not dramatically empty. I had taken the furniture, but I'd made the bed with the old comforter I was leaving behind, so it looked almost normal at a glance. Like someone had tidied up before leaving for an errand. I was standing in the kitchen getting a glass of water when he appeared. He said, "What's going on?" I said. "I found an apartment. I'm moving out today." He stared at me. I said, "I signed the lease a few weeks ago. My friends are outside with the trailer. I just wanted to say goodbye before we left." He said, "You've been planning this?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Since when?" I said, "A while." My mom came downstairs then in her robe and read the situation immediately. Her face went through several things in quick succession. She said, "You're leaving." I said, "I'm moving out. I'll still be in town. I'm not disappearing." She said, "After everything we've done for you." I said, "I know you've done a lot. I'm grateful for it. I just think it's time." Spencer appeared at the top of the stairs, took one look at the energy in the room and said, "What's happening?" My dad said, "Your sister is moving out." Spencer came down slowly. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen. He looked at me differently than usual. Not bored, not dismissive. Something else. He said, "What about the money? For the insurance?" I said, "I'm sorry. I can't help with that." He said, "So you're just leaving? Just walking away from the family?" I said, "I'm moving into an apartment. People do it all the time." He said, "You know what's going to happen to mom and dad without your rent?" I said, "I gave them 60 days notice, technically more," which was not entirely accurate. I had mentioned it 30 seconds ago, but I'd been there long enough that the legal notice question was irrelevant, and I wasn't going to be guilted with logistics. My dad said, "You planned this whole thing behind our backs." I said, "I made a private decision about my own life. I didn't think I needed a committee meeting to decide where I was going to live." He said, "You're being vindictive." I said, "I'm moving into an apartment." There was a long pause. My mom said quietly, "Did we do something wrong?" And I stood there holding my water glass and I thought about the $800. I thought about the 4,000. I thought about the speeding tickets and the car insurance and the dinners and the mornings and Spencer on the couch looking at his phone while my dad told me I needed to be a team player. I said, "I love you. I'm going to go finish loading the trailer." The text started while I was driving to the apartment. My mom first, then my dad, then Spencer. My mom's was sad. My dad's were controlled and specific. He said I had broken the family's trust, that I had demonstrated that I cared more about myself than my family, that he hoped I understood what I was throwing away. Spencer said, "Did you take Dad's watch? He can't find it." I did not take my dad's watch. I texted back, "No, check his nightstand." He texted back, "He says you took it." I did not respond to that one. The watch, I found out 2 weeks later from my aunt, had been on my dad's nightstand the whole time. I want to tell you what the first night in my apartment felt like, because I think it's the part of this story that doesn't get told enough. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't peaceful. Not right away. I sat on the floor of my living room surrounded by boxes and I ate takeout from the Thai place around the corner, and I felt unmoored. Like I'd been holding a rope for so long that now that I'd let go, I didn't know what to do with my hands. I called my college roommate. She'd known something was going on. I'd been vaguer than usual for months. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always loved about her. When I finished, she said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. I said, Like I just got off a flight where there was turbulence the whole time and now I'm on the ground and my legs haven't caught up yet. She said, "That sounds exactly right." I unpacked 3 boxes that night. I made the bed. I figured out which outlet the coffee maker needed to be near. I set an alarm for the morning. I slept better than I had in 2 years. My dad called on a Wednesday, about 3 weeks after I moved out. I let it go to voicemail. He left one 6 minutes long, measured and deliberate, which is how I knew he'd thought about it for a while. He said the family was adjusting to the new situation. He said Spencer was taking on more responsibility, which I privately doubted. He said he wanted me to know that the door was open. Then he said, "We do need to revisit the conversation about the insurance situation. It's still unresolved." I listened to the whole message twice. Then I texted him, "Thanks for calling, Dad. I'm glad to hear you're all doing okay. I'm not in a position to help with the insurance. I hope it gets sorted out." He read it. He didn't respond. 2 months later, my uncle, my dad's brother, who I'd always gotten along with, called me out of nowhere. He said my dad had reached out to him about family difficulties. He said he wasn't taking sides. He said he just wanted to check in on me. I said I was fine. I said I had a nice apartment and a parking spot and I was sleeping well. He laughed a little at that. Then he said carefully, "Your dad mentioned some money." I said he asked me to contribute to Spencer's insurance situation and I said I couldn't. My uncle said, "How much?" I told him. There was a pause. He said, "Did they pay back the 800?" I said no. He said, "I'm going to call your father." I said, "You don't have to do that on my account." He said, "I know." I don't know exactly what happened on that call, but my dad texted me 2 days later and said they had put the 800 in my account. No explanation, no context. Just a Venmo notification and a text that said, "Sending this back to you." I said thank you. Spencer tested me separately. "I can't believe you told Uncle Ray about the money." I hadn't brought it up. My uncle had asked. I texted Spencer back, "I hope you're doing okay." He didn't reply. Things are quieter now. I see my parents about once a month. Lunch usually somewhere neutral. My mom has gotten softer in some ways. She asks about my apartment, my work, whether I need anything. It's like she learned a new register somewhere in the last 6 months. My dad is more careful with me. Less certain. I don't know if that's growth or just recalibration, but either way, I'll take it. Spencer got a job at a logistics company. He seems fine. We text occasionally about nothing in particular. What I know now, that I didn't fully understand before, leaving isn't the same as giving up. I didn't stop loving my family when I signed that lease. I just decided that I also had to love myself enough to stop paying for everyone else's mistakes. My savings account is intact. The car I'm buying is a 3-year-old Honda Civic in a color I chose entirely by myself. Last week, my mom called to tell me that she'd bragged about my apartment to her book club. I laughed, the real kind, not the kind from before. I'm keeping the laugh. I keep thinking about the moment my dad's voice went quiet on the phone. Not the kind of quiet that means he was done talking, but the kind that means he'd finally run out of things to say that would work on me anymore. That quiet took 26 years to arrive. And I think it arrived because of something I had to learn the hard way. That the way you respond to being treated unfairly is not just an emotional reaction, it's a decision. And the decision you make reveals something about who you actually are. For a long time, I responded by complying. I paid the $800. I drove Spencer to class. I cooked the dinners, not because I wanted to, but because I thought compliance was the same thing as being a good person. I confused being used with being generous. Those are not the same thing, and the difference matters enormously. What I eventually understood, slowly, not all at once, is that real integrity isn't about saying yes to everyone who asks. It's about being honest about what you can actually give without destroying yourself in the process. When I finally said no to the $4,000, I wasn't being cold. I was being accurate. I knew what I had, what I'd earned, what it was for. I told the truth about it. That's not selfishness. That's a form of honesty that I'd been afraid of my whole life. The planning part, The spreadsheet, the lease, the boxes moved out gradually over 2 weeks. That didn't come from cunning, it came from clarity. Once I understood what was actually happening in that house, once I stopped explaining it away, I could think. I could figure out what a reasonable next step looked like. Intelligence, I've come to believe, isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being willing to see your situation clearly, even when the truth is uncomfortable, and then doing the math on what it actually costs you to stay. And the hardest part, the part that took the most out of me, was not moving out. It was the months before when I had decided but hadn't acted yet. When I was still driving Spencer to class and cooking dinner and answering questions about the money, knowing what I was going to do and not doing it yet. That kind of sustained patience, the ability to hold a plan steady while everything around you is pressing you to abandon it. That's what I'd call grit. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, the quiet, unglamorous kind. The kind that looks, from the outside, exactly like nothing is happening. My uncle calling my dad, the $800 showing up in my account with no explanation. My mom asking about my apartment, like she was proud of it. None of that happened because I made an angry speech or issued an ultimatum. It happened because I made a decision, followed through on it, and then let the consequences land wherever they landed. I'm not sure my family has fully changed. I'm not sure I need them to. What changed is me. What I'm willing to accept, what I'm willing to call love, what I'm willing to build a life around. The Honda Civic is silver. It has heated seats. I bought it entirely by myself. Some mornings I sit in it in the parking garage before work and I think, I did this. Not to spite my family. Not to hurt them. Just for me. Because I finally decided I was worth the trouble of figuring out. That's the thing nobody tells you about leaving a situation that's been draining you for years. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like finally getting enough sleep,